Hey everyone, welcome to the DeFi Scoop. I am your host, Dave Liebowitz, and this week we have on Mr. Joseph Delong, the CTO of SushiSwap. I'm really excited for this episode. We get into everything from his life story, from his Twitter thread, we get into how his week in Paris was, and we also get into, of course, Trident and the future of sushi. So stick around. If you like what you hear, please like, subscribe, and here we go. Hey everyone, welcome back to the DeFi Scoop, your inside scoop, everything DeFi. I am very excited to have our guest on today, Mr. Joseph Delong, the co-sushi chef, co-head sushi chef. How should I describe your title at Sushi?
I'm the contributor at Sushi.
Contributor at Sushi. Joseph, welcome to the DeFi Scoop. How are you doing today?
Great, thank you. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you, yeah. And I was thinking before this interview, this time last week, I was randomly walking around Paris my first day, and really, all of a sudden, I see you and Gasper walking on the street, and I think you guys just arrived too. And it was probably one of those coincidences, but there's no such thing as coincidence. That was a really fun day that we had after. We went to the Eiffel Tower. We had some foie gras. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was nice. It was I forget where you were. I think we were 30 minutes from the Eiffel Tower or something. When we found you.
Yeah.
And we had walked 30 minutes that way and just randomly bumped into you. It's I get it when you're close to the venue and stuff, but when you're just meeting people on the street, it's a bit more interesting,
Yeah, and that was way before the conference. That was just people who were starting to arrive that day. That day I flew in, I went to the Eiffel Tower already, I walked to the Arc de Triomphe, watched some of the Tour de France, that was cool, and I was just thinking I'm going to go back to my Airbnb and chill, and, I kept on walking for another 5 hours, which was probably to my benefit, because it forced me to stay awake, and I was not jet lagged for the rest of the time there.
Likewise. I did,
yeah.
Man, walking in Paris is, so much. I came back, and I was I've always even though I like weightlifting, probably 5 days a week, I've always had trouble maintaining the fat to muscle balance. And I came back from Paris, man, I was down something 10 pounds and
yeah, same.
I was damn.
Well, I'm not even back from Paris yet, but yeah, I know what you mean because you're walking so much more than doing anything else. It's a very walkable city, especially if you're taking the metro and whatnot.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah, so how would you describe your time in Paris? what did you think of EthCC? How would you describe, the event and just everything overall?
Sure. One of the things that, this is my third time in Paris, kind of my third time at EthCC. One thing that Americans will say is that, sorry, French people will say, French people are assholes, but in particular Parisians. And I've never found that to be true. On my third trip down, everybody's, been a sweetheart, and it's just been it's always a great time to go there. Best fashion, best food, and really nice people, in just one of the world's most beautiful cities, and so it's always a good time. ECC is one of those events that's just it's like European DEF CON, It's great to see all the people who are working in the space. I think that we've matured a lot, especially if you think about the space is what is it 6 years old now, approaching 7. There's just been such a maturity in everything that's been happening. I like to phrase it this way. Okay, 2019, I was at EthCC. There's an unknown virus is happening. Nobody knows kind of what's going on, and suddenly we're all kind of separated from each other. The future of DeFi was uncertain. The future of Ethereum was uncertain, and I feel following DeFi Summer and this bull run that followed as well, it's Ethereum and DeFi, well, not Ethereum, but Ethereum had found product market fit, but DeFi had found a significant product market fit, and the future is not so much in question as whether how broadly it will penetrate the market long term.
Yeah, like when did you know last year when DeFi Summer, like, oh wait, this is it. This is going to be like the catalyst for the next bull run. Because for me, I kind of got a special feeling in the pit of my stomach when I first started to realize in June of 2020, it was like, wait, there's something with this DeFi thing that's going on. Like, was there like a specific moment for you that you were like, wait, like DeFi, this is like going to be the product market fit for Ethereum at this moment?
Like, I think the product market fit that we found was like all around the fair launches. Like people can say, you know, like whatever aspects of DeFi are driving it, but I think fair launches were a huge moment for product market fit. Wi-Fi, Cream, Sushi, you know, Yam. You know, not all of these are like still like you know making new products or succeeding, but like you know it's just like this crazy time, and I think right around the time like you know Sushi, Yam, and Base I think launched the same week. I was like, all right, this is something's up here. This is pretty cool, and yeah, so just kind of like sat in for the ride.
Yeah, for sure. I think the coolest part about DeFi is it wasn't really about the money that you needed to get involved in. You can get involved with any amount, but you just had to have the knowledge to, you know, how to like interact with a smart contract or, you know, how to interact with MetaMask. Like, I know for me personally, it took me a little bit to realize like what farming was, and once I figured it out, I was just off to the races.
I think everybody, right? Like, and then especially,
yeah.
Like, I remember I'd been, you know, using Ethereum, deploying contracts, working in Ethereum, and I never really like focused on gas pricing because it was never like a Byzantine environment. It's like I'm gonna send a transaction in this block. It's like you know whatever 3 Gwei. There's absolutely no other person on planet Earth that's like competing with you for that block space. And so you're just like okay, whatever. It's 10 Gwei, whatever. Like boom, I'm definitely in. And like I think becoming coming from like somebody who is a casual user to being like a daily active user, I really feel like I got a grasp of like I don't know, like I feel like I was really like embracing the ecosystem rather than just like if we have dinner or whatever, I'll pay you DAI, right? Like that's
that's what I really can't wait for is you know to actually start you know paying people back in stable coins on a regular basis because right now personally. You don't think that's going to happen?
No.
You think it's going to happen?
No, I don't think so.
What? Why not?
I just think like I think the payment use case is a bit of a meme, and people like to transit. Like, for instance, like I'll use the States because like EU is not a good example because they've had like chips and everything like in their cards, RFID for forever. In the States, like we didn't change our payment rails for years. We only had like mag stripe cards like up until like I want to say it was like 3 years ago that they immediately were just like okay, no more mag stripe cards. And the reason that was is because the banks and credit card companies were able to shift the liability of fraud onto the point of sale like the stores, right? And so like they where they kind of like had dug in their heels and were like we're only doing mag strikes forever. Once kind of like they were then like responsible for fraud in these cases, they started to go, oh okay, you know we'll take chips and RFID, right? And so like I think that those like relationships between like how you pay are like relatively well settled and just like they don't disrupt that often. Like if you go to Japan, they're like a very much a cash society, and you'll find kind of like it's almost like cultural, like wherever you go.
Oh, okay.
And so I just like I don't see P2P payments in the near term being like a viable use case, especially because of the time that it takes to go from like crypto and remit back to your like bank account. Like if you're like chilling with like your homies and stuff, and they're all like crypto people, like but like I don't see like the P2P payments happening anytime soon.
Yeah, you don't see it happening anytime soon, unless you know everybody just adopts crypto. But who knows when that will happen over like a long enough time scale? Have you been to Japan?
Yeah, I went for DEF CON 5, right? I went to Osaka.
Oh, okay,
When I
yeah.
was young, I went to Tokyo. We used to live in Alaska. My dad was a Coast Guard. We lived in Kodiak, and we could take I forget what they call it. They could call them MACD flights. It's like these flights that you go to the military base, and if they're flying somewhere, like you could just kind of like get on the plane and ride.
You can just hop along, hitch a ride.
Yeah, pretty sure we flew a C-130 there, if I recall. So yeah.
Cool. So, with that said, like, what was your upbringing like? You said your dad was in the Coast Guard, so did you move around a lot?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I was a military brat. I was born in Delaware. You know, lived in Alaska, North Carolina, Virginia, Delaware again, and then Texas, and then I joined the military.
Yeah. How were you in school? Because it seemed like you had like a lot of like odd jobs after.
Oh,
Would
dude.
you consider yourself a?
No, I was a shitty student. And it's just like keep in mind, like I'm growing up in like the 80s and 90s. Like, sorry to like reveal that I'm just old as fuck, right? But in that time, like there was controversy around like ADHD diagnoses and medications. There seemed to be like a huge like a upswing in diagnosis. So a lot of people didn't necessarily believe in ADHD as like a diagnosis. It was kind of like the way that some people. I feel like there's a common sentiment around like autism like that now, where it's kind of like we see a huge upswing and people don't really understand. People don't really understand what the upswing is, and so they're kind of like trying to attribute it to something, saying like, no, people have always been like this, et cetera, et cetera. And so like, didn't really get the ADHD stuff under control until I was like well into college. And so I was definitely a terrible student.
Were you into computers or programming at all when you were younger?
Yeah, I mean, like I was into computers. I wasn't really into programming. I was kind of like, I like flipped through the QBasic book just like everybody else at that time, and like done a couple of the tutorials. Didn't really like.
Wait, what's the QBasic book?
Oh, QBasic is like this, just like if I remember correctly, this is the MS DOS like flavor of BASIC, and BASIC is like not a great programming language. It doesn't really follow some of the like standard principles that we use today, like OOP programming. It was actually more like in design. It was probably more similar to like assembly, and also had lots of like weird characteristics, like this like jump, etc. And like it turns out later that like static analysis hates jumps because it makes it basically impossible to do a static analysis of the application.
Okay, so you were flipping through Q books, but you weren't good at school, and then after I guess you graduated high school, or a little bit into your 20s, you were doing a bunch of odd jobs, like you were surveying. I read your Twitter thread, which was excellent, by the way. You were doing odd jobs like surveying in Houston. You were like driving pizzas in a college town. You joined the military in between, so it seemed like you were just like kind of just like hopping around.
Yeah, from the time I was like 18 until I joined the military, I was fired from like every single job that I ever had. And one of those jobs was the most miserable, which is land surveying in Houston, and it's just.
What is this, the 1800s?
This is like 2002, 2003, right? Like we've just like we're deep in Afghanistan, like, and like we're gearing up to for Iraq, and so I'm just like kind of like fucking floating around, just like doing bullshit, and I got fired from that job. I got fired from Walmart. I mean, like, who gets fired from Walmart, right? Like, you got to be a special kind of stupid. And then like, I'm like really struggling, like financially, and like I said in the thread, it's just like kind of like this consistent like system where banks are kind of like ripping you off.
Is that when you first started to realize it? Like when you're experiencing it, like what the hell are these banks doing? I'm at my lowest low and they're just taking advantage of it.
Totally. And like the other thing to keep in mind is that like when you're in that space, one of the mental gymnastics that you do is that you think that there's something like morally deficient with you, right? The reason that I keep overdrafting is because I'm not like pulling out my thing and like, you know, like writing down every single transaction. I'm not doing like a great accounting job, but in reality, like even, you know, pennies or timing can result in these overdraft transactions, and like that's pretty vulnerable. And to think that, you know, banks can just kind of like do whatever they want. And so like,
yeah, not just to you, but at like a massive scale. Like you're not the only one.
Totally. And when I worked at a bank, I had helped build them a system that eliminated overdrafts, kind of like on the heels of my understanding of what it's like being poor. Because even like the bank that I work for specifically targets like military and like veterans. Excuse me, for their membership, and like something that people should know is that even military people, like especially low-ranking military members, don't really make that much money. But when I joined the military, it felt like I was a millionaire, right? Like from the jump, like having, you know, enough food to eat, having like a place to stay, like being able to like, you know, buy something like extra that's like, you know, not something like it's like keeping you alive. But
and so when did you join? Yeah, when did you join the military?
2004 in December. And I got
okay, so like right when the Iraq War was kicking off.
Totally. I mean, like we'd been in it like in December 2004. We had been in it for like a year and a half or so. I think I joined like 6 months earlier, but they have like all this scheduling, you know, like moving like humans around the country is a bit like
I remember like I was a kid when all that was happening, and like that was kind of like I couldn't imagine kind of like a world without 9/11 and a world without the Iraq war and stuff. So it's like really interesting to see, like looking back, like all the, I guess there was like a lot of hysteria around it, you know, like around WMDs, around like terrorism. Like we don't really have that too much anymore, but like back then it was like really, it was like all over the place.
Yeah, you still got to take your shoes off though at the airport. Because
that's the legacy of it.
Because terrorists never thought to pay $150 a year for pre-check. You know, they're just like terrorists are just like, God, foiled again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, what were you doing in the military exactly?
I was an electronic warfare technician, which is like repairing systems that are used for radar jamming.
Okay.
And like most of there hasn't really been a fighter, bomber, or any of our aircraft that have been shot down in 45 years basically.
40. Wait, so a plane hasn't been shot down in 45 years?
Don't quote me on that. I mean, it's like something like that. It's like it's very high. Like our last major engagements. Like in air-to-air combat, were like in Libya and, you know, Desert Storm. Everything else has been you know, not real major air-to-air engagements. And so what happens is they're like these surface-to-air missiles use they use like radars, and they scan the skies basically looking for aircraft. And I worked on the systems that would like generally jam those radars to like confuse the weapons and make them not hit the B-1s that I was working on.
Okay. Yeah. And it was in the military. And how many years were you in the military for?
4.
4, and it was in those years that, you know, you mentioned the thread that, you know, you started getting into like libertarianism and Ron Paul and economics more. Yeah. Like how did that happen? Like, did someone say like, hey, you should check out Ron Paul, or did somebody like send you a letter or something, like a random like Ron Paul person? Like, because I know there's like a campaign by like, you know, people of all across the political spectrum to send soldiers letters about like, hey, you should read about like, you know, communism or read about libertarianism or read about this or that, you know. Was it something like that?
You know what it was? It was there was this time where it was like Dig was like one of the main.
Dig.
By the way, like when Kevin Rose from Dig like followed me on Twitter, I was like screaming, but I didn't know like who to tell, right? Like I couldn't tell any of my friends that Kevin Rose is following me. It's like they'd be like, who? You know? It's like you don't get it, you know.
So he's the founder of Dig?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like really like formative for me, and like but anyway, Ron Paul was like very popular at this time, and I started like kind of like, you know, making campaign signs and like shit posting about like Ron Paul, and you can't be super active with like you know, any political movement when you're in the military. They have special rules about that. And yeah, it's just like starting to like understand personal liberty. In hindsight, it feels so like hand in glove, but like if you think about it, Ron Paul started running for the nomination for the Republican ticket and expressing these like fundamental beliefs about sound money, like way prior to the housing crisis. Right? Yeah. He
for like that whole decade, he was always about, you know, end the Fed. Yeah. I mean, who could forget end the Fed and all that stuff?
Yeah.
But you're
arrest the banksters,
yeah, all that stuff. But yeah, you're right. Like Ron Paul, like he kind of had the same line for the longest time, in the same way that Bernie Sanders has had the same line for the longest time. You know, just beating that drum, and you can definitely see his kind of legacy. You know, with cryptocurrency and a lot of people that got into cryptocurrency and got into blockchain and got into Bitcoin. You know, sound monetary policy. That's the basis of it all.
Yeah. This is like, so like, you know, I'm into that. I'm into all these like libertarian movements. I'm into like personal freedoms, especially because I have so little being in the military. And I get out and it's like, I don't remember what month the housing crisis happened. I think it was in September of 2008. I'm getting out of the military at like December of 2008. It was just like it's like they drop you out like 4 years like to the day, not like, you know, like a week here, a week there. It's like to the day. Like December 28th, 2008. I'm like out, and I'm like enrolled in this like little school, McMurray, for math and computer science, and like I'm just like, fuck, dude, I can't get a job. I get a job at like the YMCA, like watching kids, which like, if anybody knows me, like I like watching my own kids, and that's about it, right? Like it's like not about anybody else's kids in my life, and I like get fired from that job, like get a job like delivering pizzas, and it's like super. I have like a super shitty car that I'm delivering pizzas in. Like it is a 99 Honda Civic with mismatched body panels and no air conditioning in, you know, essentially the Texas desert, and delivering pizzas, which I actually fucking love that job. Gave me time.
Yeah, do you feel like that job was a turning point for you?
Totally. Like I felt like however like hard you worked was however much money that you made. They were almost like correlated. And like I would work on my car because I would save the money from like having somebody else do my brakes, or I would change my own oil. Those sorts of like relatively minor car like, repairs.
Yeah.